Hello. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Weird Wednesdays. So, today we are going to be talking all about the polyvagal, and this is with Francine Kay. So, we're just going to have to sort of you're going to have to bear with us while I get Francine on. So, let's see. There's Francine. That's great, Francine. So, all you have to do now is you will see an option to request to join the video, and you can do that. See an invite button, and then you click on that, and then you can join. Thanks everyone for joining. Hello, hello, hello.
Hello, hello. There we go. Done it. Very proud of myself.
Good boy, good boy. Sorry, Rocky's my dog's about to bark. He was like, "Where's that second voice just come from?" Rocky. Okay.
Hello.
So, to Weird Wednesdays, and guys, if anyone's got any questions about this as we go along, please just feel free to drop them in the DM and I will pick them up and answer them. So I will just hand it over to Francine to just describe and explain a little bit about what this new theory of helping people with maybe emotional stuckness or triggers, how it works, and what are you seeing with it?
Okay, so this is, it's called the polyvagal theory, but it's very old. It's not that, I think everything is kind of a repackage of something else.
Sure.
And so it's looking at the nervous system in three parts. I'm actually going to do something which is like really normal, which is I'm going to sort of draw it out. And if anybody wants to join in with this, what I'm drawing here, I've got no idea if anyone can see it, but it's an oblong with three boxes in it. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
So, and we're going to use that as our framework.
Okay.
So what it's about is that whereas the vagus nerve that comes all the way up through your body was usually used by physicians and by anybody in that profession to look at our digestive system, our immune system, and all the things that were working on the inside, this theory is much more about how does our nervous system impact our emotions? What's going on in our nervous system, which is automatic, which makes us react the way that we do emotionally to whatever is happening that gives us that emotional hit.
Francine, let me just for everyone out there, guys, we've got our autonomic nervous system, and there are two strains to that. We've got our parasympathetic system, which the digestive system loves. We call it rest and digest. And then the other strain is called the sympathetic, which is stressed, catabolic, tired and wired. So our autonomic nervous system basically controls everything that you do on a regular basis. Blinking, heart rate, basal metabolic rate, right. You name it, it does it. So you've got a stress side and you've got a rest and digest side.
And you've then also got the top part of it. So if we look at it in this kind of format, and in that box there, anybody who wants to write along, this part here is ventral vagal. So this part here is parasympathetic, but it is the rest part. So in that ventral vagal part at the top, when we're in that place, we're feeling calm, we're feeling curious, we're in flow, we are easy breathing, we are self-regulated, and we could also be co-regulated, which is calmed down by somebody else. We are creative, we are rested, we are at peace, and we're calm. But let me explain the two regulations. So you could be in that place if you've managed to calm yourself down. So you could be taking a deep breath, you could be doing your meditation, you could be out for a walk, you could be on holiday, you could be in flow with a really interesting piece of work. And you'll know that you're there because you haven't got any particular story going on about what's going on with you emotionally, or whether this one spoke to you, or whether you're feeling bad about this, that, and the other. You are really in a calm place, and it's always, your breath is always easy here.
And so are you asking if that's our normal state? Is that if that is the normal place we're in?
It's not necessarily the normal place we're in. You'd almost have to be a Zen Buddhist monk to be there all of the time. But yeah, I don't know any Zen Buddhist monks who have gone to work, had families and children, going through a recession or health issues or anything else. So
this is the place that we're really trying to be in,
where we would like to be in.
Right. Yeah.
And most of the time, so if we just called this place calm, which it's not just calm, it's got all those other components in it. We want to be in there most of the time, but where we generally live is on the borders. We generally live on the border with it, because the border is where we are pseudo calm, pseudo ventral, enough for us to tolerate life and get on with things. Because we can't be in a meditative state all of the time, we can't be in flow all the time, we're dipping in and out. In order to regulate ourselves enough to exist and function, we've got to be in a place where it's tolerable. Okay. So most of us will reach a tolerable state, and then we might go on holiday and be given a cocktail on the beach, and we'll be very, very much in our parasympathetic, in our ventral part of the parasympathetic. Now, the interesting thing about that place, as I've mentioned, is it doesn't have a personal story attached to it. And I'll go back to co-regulation in a moment. The next box down is in sympathetic, and this is where fight and flight lives. So in this box down here, the next one down, we've got fight and flight. Now, fight and flight is very interesting, because how you're experiencing it there is you're probably agitated, excited in some ways. You're on higher alert. You've got shorter breath. So you're anxious. You are ready for action, either defense or attack. And there is always a personal story that goes there.
So this is a time where you've been triggered. So let's say you've had an argument with a partner, there's been a bad email, you're not being able to communicate in a flow state, you've been triggered, and your physiology is creeping in, shortness of breath, sympathetic, thoughts that are triggered by lots of different things. So we've moved out of flow and we're into this anxious place. And yeah. Okay, right. So just
you've been triggered in there. So
good for people to be thinking of at this moment, I suppose, Francine, when are you triggered? Think about a time that you are triggered, or what situation does trigger you.
And in that, you're absolutely spot on right. That trigger is part of your, and possibly all of your, personal story. So imagine that all of us have a part of us which gets triggered. So for example, if I give you a personal example, so my biggest trigger would have a banner headline of it of "I'm not important enough."
Okay.
So in that, what might happen is I might even be in my car and a driver cuts me up. And my thought is, oh, I think you're more important than I am, do you? Or I could be in another situation where I'm at work or I'm doing something and somebody says something which kind of like deflates me or puts me down in some way. And I could be, it wouldn't necessarily be I'm not important enough, but you think I don't know as much as you know. Or you think that this, and I'm now getting triggered into a state of possible anxiety here. Now,
so all these triggers, all these triggers, they're negative thoughts, then it's negative programming from wherever it's come from. Let's just say it's arrived. But they're all about our emotional status, these triggers.
They're all about our emotional state, in as much as when we were younger, we had what we call implicit memory. So implicit memory meant that we couldn't yet speak and articulate, but things were happening. We're born into an other-based society. We can't crawl like ants, we can't swim like fish, we can't walk like cats and dogs. We lay on our backs, we poo, cry, sleep and eat for a while. So what we have to do is adapt ourselves to this other-based society that we're born into. And if mum holds us and she's not fractious, we're fractious, we're crying, there's something wrong with us. If mum holds us and she is in a very good state, or dad or chief carer holds us and they're in a good state, we can regulate our nervous systems with them. Babies cannot self-regulate. So we need to be regulated by another human being. We co-regulate when we're babies.
And does that regulation happen, you know, obviously from mother to baby for sure, and parents, but in relationships, is that part of the codependency that we find ourselves in, not wanting to leave because we've created these bonds that are actually more physically strong emotional bonds, and we actually realize it's not just about sharing the rent, it's about actually these emotional and physical bonds that we're creating through this nervous system
that we created so early on when we couldn't have added any meaning to it. So if when you hold me I'm able to calm down, then, and I get a kind of like, that's what I really need because you're always there for me in adult relationship, I'm going to want to co-regulate in that way. But as adults, we have to find a way of regulating our own nervous system as well as co-regulating. In relationship, we want both. Because if we are dependent on the other person continuously to give us that level of regulation as adults, that creates what they call codependency. So we want to be able to do both. So if we go back to the fight and flight just for a moment, when you're in that place, then what's actually happening to you is you've been triggered, as you said, by something that's happening that has attacked those emotions, and it's dangerous. So we are now in our danger zone. Now we're going to either attack or we're going to defend, but you cannot be there unless you've created a story about what is happening and what it means to you. If I walk down the road and I see you and you ignore me, and you may not have even seen me, but I feel ignored, and I've got a banner called I'm not important enough, then I'm going to go, what's the matter with her? You know, she ignored me. Oh my goodness me, you know, and I'm now anxious. I could at that point go, oh, but I better not say anything because I could upset her. So then I might go into the flight part of it. And then because it's so upsetting for me, I might do something else, which I'll show you in a moment. But the nervous system holds the score of the original story. So
which we might not know.
You may not know. And that's what's so aggravating about it, because it's automatic. The body that kept the score of the upset kicks in even before the mind has got a chance to actually say, oh, this means that. But you know what? Now isn't when that really is happening. I've brought the past into my present.
So it's good for everyone listening. If you've got a trigger, if you've got a way of dealing with something maybe difficult, like I use myself as an example, Francine. So if I used to be quite defensive, like I can be quite, you know, when I was younger, or maybe even up to a few years ago, I would meet everything with defense. If I thought somebody was having a go at me, if I thought somebody was criticizing me, I'd be like, go into straight defense mode. Now, I'm aware that that's something I did, and I'm don't do it as much as I ever did. I'm not triggered by things as much as I am anymore. But where did that first start? Where do we get these first reactions to things? Because obviously they're they hidden, or maybe we do know them, but I'm guessing most people don't.
So something will have happened when you're growing up. So as you're being raised, for example, if there is a level of anxiety going on within the family, and actually what you need is to get your needs met. When they aren't met, you are going to try to fight against it in some ways, or defend yourself in some ways. If you've got a sibling who has more attention than you have, or you've got a parent who is unwell in some way, and you are not getting your needs met, you're either going to be fighting against that, or you're going to have an anxiety around it. So you'll find children, even in the same family, being brought up by the same parents, experiencing something entirely different. So for example, if you had an alcoholic mother, and you, most of the time you came home from school and she's in a comatose state, and so you've got to prepare your own tea and one thing and another. When you grow up and somebody, your partner, is not being there for you, there's no equality going on. It's not like you want them to do everything for you, but there's no equality going on. You're probably going to be, if you're a defensive person, you're going to be saying it's not fair, because why, and it should be, and this, that, and the other. Or if you are a stronger character, you might say, what's the matter with you? Why don't you do this, 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 and this? So depending on your nature, as well as the nurture, is whether you're going to be a fighter or a flighter. And I'm a bit of both, because I was brought up in a family where I was excluded so much that what I'll do now is I'll say, excuse me, and then because I'll get the response, which is a put down, I'll pull away really quickly. Now my nervous system has kept the score of that. So even before I go into defense or attack, my body in my chest closes in. Some people can feel the emotional hit in their stomachs. You know, you talk about the gut so much, the gut feeling, the gut reaction. What the gut brain is holding on to is also so much part of this. Men tend to get an awful lot in their shoulders. They're like forward like that. You know, women are more in the underbelly, the softer chest part. You know, people get it wherever they get it, the emotional hit. And they're either going into fight or flight or a little bit of both. But it will be based on the story that they added, where they added meaning to what was happening. I'm not important enough. I have to crack on and get on with it. I've got to be the responsible one. No one listens to me. I don't have a voice.
So then we're triggered by something. We're triggered by something, and you know, you might feel like you're being triggered by these things all the time. So the next step would be being aware that you're being triggered and you're responding to that in a certain way. So we've gone through all of them. I'm not good enough. I'm not intellectual enough. I'll never make it. They're all negative thoughts. So when you're aware of that, then what can you do now? If you're a person sitting here going, oh God, that's me. I get triggered and I do all these things and I get really anxious. What's the next step, Francine?
Well, the thing is that we haven't looked at is the last piece.
Yeah.
So this piece here is called dorsal. And this is part of the parasympathetic. It's what you would have called rest and recuperation, and I call freeze. So this is where, when the trigger gets so overwhelming for some people won't go into fight or flight, they'll go into freeze. And what you'll experience with somebody who gets overwhelmed that way is they become still, they become non-verbal, even their hearing is impaired, and they get very still, and their breath is held there, because dorsal was the first line of our defense, you know, prehistorically. So dorsal's about like 400 million years old, and sympathetic is about 300 million years old, and ventral is about 200 million years old. It's all old, but the dorsal is the oldest of our defenses. Because if you were being chased by a saber-toothed tiger or you came across one, you're not likely to go, "Hi, how are you?" You're going to keep still because you're going to try and want to save your own life. So depending on our nature as well as our nurture, if it's a dangerous situation, or we've been brought up in a family where people don't say very much and somebody is attacking us with words,
yeah,
we might very much keep very still. It looks like we've gone behind our eyes and we are overwhelmed. We're not going to do anything about it. We could stay in this place for hours, days, and weeks. And this is where you meet people who withdraw to such an extent that either they get depressed when they get to that place, or people in relationship with them say they're just so avoidant. I can't connect with them in any way. And the question you're now asking is, if with these three, this one and this one, there has to be a story to be there, and you're in that triggered story place, how on earth do you get yourself out of it? So the first thing is you have to know that you're there. You have to have an awareness that you have been triggered. Okay, you don't know what to do about it at the moment, but you know that you have been triggered. The other thing to do is to locate, have I frozen with it? Have I numbed it? Or am I still in fighting mode, or am I running away from it? And you obviously can't do this whilst it's happening. This is a reflection after the event to really have a look to see, here's what I do. Okay, so my story is I'm stuck now in flight because I'm not important enough, and I'm stuck in flight and I've run away from the situation. What am I going to do? So I'm going to give you, I'm going to tell you a little anecdotal story which would give you an idea of this. I was in a relationship, and at the beginning of this relationship, I went to a party with my partner, and his daughter was there, and they hadn't been divorced for very long, and this was a very young person. And in her mind as well, she was about 21, but she was very young. And a song came on at this party. Do you remember that song, "You to Me Are Everything"? You to Me Are Everything. I mean, I can't sing, but it came on. And the daughter was gesticulating to her father, "You to me are everything." And I'm standing there thinking, oh my goodness, it's happening to me again. I'm going to be not important enough. And, you know, there may as well be three of us in this relationship. I may as well call myself Diana and be done with it. So I know I'm being triggered. I know I'm being triggered. So what I do is I try to breathe through it. It's proving a bit difficult. The breath would be obviously one of the first things that you could do, is to breathe. Get yourself back into the present moment. Can't do that. So what I do is I take myself off. Actually, I took myself up to a stranger's bathroom in this house, and I listened to that part of me that holds on to that story, which is, I'm not important enough. So she says to me, this younger part of me, "See, you've done it again. You're not important enough. There's going to be three of you in this relationship. How the hell did you get yourself into this situation again?" And I say to her, "Look, I know how this feels. I know this part of me that gets triggered. I know that's this younger part of you that felt very excluded when we were children. Here's the thing. This is his daughter. He had a relationship with her long before we came along. So it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not important enough, that we're not important enough. We have to find a way of managing this because we're a grown-up now." And she says to me, "Well, what are you going to do about it?" And I said, "Well, what we're going to do is you're going to leave it to me to handle it. And then when the time is right, if it happens again, then we'll deal with it." And then I come back downstairs and I'm calmer. So the point is that whenever you're in either of these places, you have to get into conversation with your trigger. You have to know what part of you has been triggered, because otherwise you're going to be reactive, which is always reenacting what you did back there then. Now, there's loads of ways of doing it. You can either do it with the breath. So you take 5 in breaths and 5 out breaths, because it's going to completely change your physiology. Or you know that you're there, you take yourself off and you have that kind of conversation with yourself. And then there's something else which an adult has that a child doesn't have. And that word is choice. So I now can choose. Do I stay in this place, dig in my heels and say you and blame and shame and all of that? Or do I say, I choose not to experience this and feel this. So the action that I'm going to take is this, this, and this. Now, the outcome and consequence could be perhaps something will change, perhaps it won't. But I can take back control. So to get yourself out, to make this journey back up from, say, dorsal to calm, or from fight to fight to calm, everybody has a methodology. Some people might take some time out. Some people might breathe and meditate. Some people might go for a walk. Some people might, we don't want you to turn to food or to alcohol or to anything else, because that just numbs it. We want you to be able to feel it, but at the same time, we want you to be able to find a way of taking yourself back into ventral. That's called self-regulation. And in a relationship, if there's been a rupture and you want to move towards repair in your relationship, you do have to put on your own oxygen mask before you go out there and express your needs. Because if you haven't taken a little bit of care of you, you're going to go for the co-regulation. Help me, make it better, make it better. And that means you become very codependent on the other person to provide that for you. What we want is for everyone to be able to do a certain amount of self-regulation and then go for the co-regulation. So that was very, very long-winded, but does it make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I think the biggest step is being aware that you're being triggered, and also understanding what places you go into. Do you fight and shout? Do you stay quiet? And actually the staying quiet is quite interesting, because I'm not sure we're aware that that is a response. Maybe we always think that a response is to retaliate, and not necessarily in the best way. But saying nothing, being in that dorsal place, that sort of maybe even a passive aggressive place, is very we don't understand that as much, because it's not as common, I suppose.
Not talked about so much, and it's a very important place. And a lot of people, I mean, I don't go there naturally. It has to be very bad for me to go into a freeze place and go off the radar with my friends, for example. But that place, for a lot of people, and the people who go there the most, are what we call avoidants. So these are people who, when there's an argument or an upset, really withdraw and don't want to talk about it.
And why does that happen? That sounds, yeah, I understand that. Why do people just go straight to avoidance? I can't be bothered, I don't know the words, or it's a nervous thing?
It's overwhelm. It really is overwhelm. If you say if, for example, you're brought up in a family where nobody talks about anything, and you are, even if you have a tantrum, or even if you have a big upset, it's not really talked about. Nobody really acknowledges or validates you. What you may very well do then is go internally to look after yourself. So you become a very internalized person, and you don't want to get yourself into drama or anything like that. So you meet up, you're that kind of person, and you meet up with somebody who's rather exciting and's got rather a lot to say. And this is rather lovely because you've not been around that kind of person before. And it's lovely for a honeymoon period. But when that person then, when you get quiet and they go, well, just talk about it. Come on, let's just talk about it. You're kind of like, what? There is no way at this point I can't talk about, I'm not sure I'm ever going to be able to talk about it, but at this point I certainly can't. So that dorsal place of the first line of strategic survival happens to a lot of people because it's too overwhelming to deal with it right then. I don't have the skills and tools to do that. Plus, I don't like, I mean, conflict and confrontation are not my best friends. And I feel safer. It's safer in here, internalized, it's safer in here. And interestingly, people who withdraw generally find themselves in relationship with people who are quite anxious and don't withdraw, who live much more in fight and flight. And so there's really a challenge because one's a maximizer and the other one's a minimizer. One's going towards, the other one's pulling back. And that can make for a very interesting relationship.
Interesting in a learning way, or interesting in a ends up,
Well, interesting in a way that why would you meet somebody like that? And why would you pair up oftentimes several times over with couples like that? Because relationships are not about 2.4 children and roses round the door. Relationships are about healing the past. Relationships are about completing childhood. So what we want is for people to understand their own triggers and what's going on for them.
So if, because somebody's just sort of asked a question, what if you, let's say, one, as you say, is the minimizer and one is the maximizer. What do you, the one that shuts down, what are you supposed to do with that if you've got somebody that just shuts down?
The one that shuts down has to be able to recognize that they do, because so it's like a crazy eight where one starts and the other one ends. So imagine I'm the one that shuts down. You have just said something to me which is too much. You're trying to pull me into some kind of argument, or you want to talk about something and I do not want to. Not now. If I want to be in relationship with you, I am going to have to say something, otherwise I may as well just stay single. But if I'm in relationship with you and now is not the time to talk, I would say to you something like, Hannah, I can't talk about it now. Just give me some time and I will be back. Now, if I do not say I will be back to an anxious person, they're going to follow me out the room, or they're going to keep on badgering me. If the anxious person knows that I just want my space and I will come back, it will, to some degree, lower their anxiety around, this won't be resolved, I'm being rejected, you're dismissing me, you're not interested in what I've got to say anyway, no one ever is, join a long line of people who were never particularly interested in me and what I had to say.
I think you've just summed up everyone.
Yeah. So now if I'm the anxious one and I want to talk to the avoidant one, I might actually say, listen, there's something that's not working for me. I want to find a good time to talk to you. I know now might not be because I'm catching you on the back foot, but I've got something I need to talk about. Can you tell me when a good time to do that would be? So it's that back and forth of the anxious one owning their anxiety and knowing how that may come across to the dorsal one who's going to get overwhelmed. And when I work with couples, virtually all the couples that I work with are anxious and avoidance. Because if you got two avoidants together, there'd be such a wide gap. Nobody would ever speak to each other at all.
Well, there'd be no arguments.
They'd be silent. It'd be very quiet. And that does happen in relationship. People, I know somebody who went for 28 years in his marriage. They never had an argument about anything. The last 4 years, they just conversed on Post-it notes.
Jesus.
Yeah, that much avoidant or anxious. Both of you are so anxious and wound up all of the time. What's interesting about that is if one is more anxious than the other's anxiousness, generally that one can take a step back because all the worrying's being done for them.
Yeah. So that was my question, that you can have two likes, two people alike, but there's always different degrees and it's always still different.
And it's always still different. different. So if it was like a pie chart, I might be more anxious than I am avoidant, and I might be quite secure in a lot of ways.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's...
And so basically, we haven't got much more time, but basically the problem with or the reason this is so interesting is because I think we can very easily sail through life just dealing with the problem that has occurred and hoping that that issue or problem doesn't happen again. But if it does, then we just deal with it, as opposed to actually spotting patterns and trends and triggers and understanding that our physiology is, or we're more prone to being sympathetic, stressed, or avoidant or anxious, and that actually is our makeup. And if we don't understand what our makeup is in these emotional traits that we have, then we never learn, and we either go through life then saying, oh, it's all rubbish, I'll never have this, could never create it. But actually it always comes back to us, to me. Have I made it up? Am I totally making it up? Or is it true?
Where does it come from? Where does it come from? How is it I'm more anxious than he is avoidant? How come I'm more a person who runs away than a person who stays and faces it? What was it in my backstory that happened where my body, first off, kept the score of what happened? And then what kind of meaning did I put on that? And then am I living it out? And how am I attracting people into my life who trigger exactly that? For the purposes of me now being an adult and being able to heal myself through intimate relationship where I was originally kind of wounded. If I can understand what's happening, why it's happening, how it's happening, and we can together decide what we're going to do about it, relationships can be the most healing of places. Because I like to say that relationship is a game for grown-ups played by children, until we know, all of these different factors, the body, the mind, how the whole thing works together. So it's complex, but once it's unpacked, it's really easy, because we've only had one past. Our partners have only had one past. So if we can understand that, and we can understand the connection and the dynamic that's playing out, we can heal our bodies, we can lower our stress. The whole thing is all tied up together, as you well know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, absolutely. So what would be good is to think about what are the things that trigger you, and then how you react to them. What's your really good super?
Yeah, your default. Where's the default that you go?
Let's call it a superpower. Where's your default? Do you go to defense? Do you go to shouting? Do you go to angry? Do you go to silent? Do you go to avoidance? Where do you go? And when you go to that place, how does your physiology feel? Are you abundant in breath or short of it? Are you monkey brained, anxious? Are you calm? Are you processing, not processing? And then I suppose the next bit is what you're saying is to, if you are avoidant, to be able to, once you have processed things, be able to come back into the conversation, because that anxious person is not going to be the one to do that, because the avoidant one is the one that's almost created it.
Well, so, no, yes, no, there's nobody to blame here.
Oh, okay.
No, absolutely no blaming whatsoever, because it could very well be it's the anxious one that actually got the avoidant one so overwhelmed that they had to step back, or the avoidant one has been stepped back for so many days that the anxious one is frantic with wanting to co-regulate and share again. So it's such a crazy eight. You don't know where one begins and one ends. Yeah. But there's blame.
And I suppose also then you can, because we're chameleons, you can trigger me in a way that I become anxious, and your sister could trigger me in a way that I become avoidant. So
Yeah.
not to say that I'm always anxious when I get triggered. I'm always angry when I get triggered. I change depending on that stimulus into the autonomic system. Whatever that stimulus, that therefore changes how I trigger. Somebody.
Lots of different stories, you see. So if I've got, for example, my father was an extremely frightening person. So if I'm around people who feel to me as if they could be frightening, I go right into dorsal. I might not look so much dorsal on the outside, but I have withdrawn on the inside. I'm not going anywhere near it. Whereas I go around somebody who there's a hierarchy and they are acting in a very superior manner towards me, I probably will go into my sympathetic, into a little bit of fight. And then depending on how strong they are, I might then retreat a bit. So you're absolutely right. Depending on the situation and the person, we're going to, that's why we've got the pie chart of it. So sometimes I can be more anxious, sometimes I can be more avoidant, and sometimes I can be pretty secure.
Okay.
Just spot. Yeah.
So that's all really, really interesting because, you know, it is all about the learning. And I think what's really fascinating about relationships, and certainly when people are getting to them a little bit older, or they've decided not to do any of this sort of compromise, or they just wanted to, or they needed to learn more about them, that you do find that the partner you're with is teaching you some really great lessons if you're only willing to listen. Otherwise you just go defense, defense, defense. I know why you're laughing. But it's fascinating. Francine, how can people get in touch with you? Because I think everyone needs a good old chat with Francine Kay. I've known Francine for 15 years, and in any time I'm triggered or just need something, she's on my speed dial. So how can people get in touch with you?
So they can get in touch with me, Francine at francinek.com. So that's my full name is FRANCINEKAYE.com. So Francine at francinek.com. I'm guessing I'm absolutely technophobic. So I'm imagining it's possible to get hold of me via this media. I have no idea. Or you can just text me 07931
I'll put your number in the
You'll
post.
Put my,
yeah.
And what I'm offering at the moment is what I call a discovery call, because you know many of you guys don't know who I am, and you know it's all a bit of an unknown entity, but I do a free discovery call for half an hour, and you can bring whatever you want to that. You know, at the end of it, if it was something that you wanted to do, if you wanted to work with me, I'd always tell you to go away and think about it anyway. So you're not put on the spot or pressurized in any way that would get you into fight or flight or dorsal or any of those. But so just that's on offer if you'd like it. And also on my website, francinek.com, there's a free report that you can go and download, which is the 7 secrets of successful relationships. So there's a couple of ways that you can get to know me.
Amazing, that's great. And also, if you just want to DM me for any of Francine's details, I will pass them on. Guys, thanks for being on the call. Thanks for interacting. Thank you for your questions. I will be putting this video on my platform now, so you can ask any questions, and Francine has access to it to answer. Thanks for being here, Francine, and for the work you do. I think that you know, and your Francine's way of working to get you to understand why you do the things you do is really phenomenal, and it's really eye-opening to just learning about a little bit more of the jigsaw puzzle that we are all, and it's just about learning a little bit more each time to understand why you do the things you do, why you get into these places when you know you don't want to be in them, and what oh God, sorry, someone just came to the door. Rocky, oh, it's God. Okay, so can you hear the barking?
Yeah, I can hear it. Yeah.
So yeah, just a really good way of understanding yourself. Nearly had a heart attack. Really good way of understanding yourself. So do reach out if you want to have Francine's details. I will forward them on. Thanks so much, Francine, and hopefully we'll see each other in person very soon.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been lovely. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Okay, have a wonderful Easter, everyone.